individual facts will be derivative unless that's the fact of what is absolute. So if you want to say if the atheist says the apple is on the counter, can you say that's true? Well, in one sense they can, in another sense they can't. In the sense that if you're going to account for the actualness of that statement, then you're going to have to trace the lineage or its derivation to that which is fundamentally absolute that provides for that dependency state. If you simply ignore the dependency state, you can't have any true statements that are independent of some absolute or that which is absolute. So, for example, an atheist scientist could come up with a cure for, let's say, cancer, but ultimately his quote truth statement is inconsistent with his own foundation.
But it's still true.
No, it's no. What are we? How are we going to define true? True will have to be in respect to its relation to what is absolute. If the truth claim itself is not have its derivation in what is fundamentally absolute and unconditionally non-dependent, then it's not true. I want to ask you a question, Hogtie.
It's not true. That doesn't make sense.
You're fully aware that both the atheist and the theist could say the sky is blue. And when we both make those statements, there are implicit premises that are unstated, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we elucidate those unstated premises, then both of those statements are incompatible with each other, because the believer says the sky is blue in ultimate derivation from the God of the Christian scriptures, who is the creator and sustainer of all things. Whereas the atheist says, no, the sky is blue not in virtue of the God of the Christian scriptures. So those two statements cannot be true, both true.
But the statement itself, the sky is blue, they're both correct about that, right?
No.
As would a deist.
You're failing to take into consideration, if we're going to, in the course of a conversation, simply ignore its truthfulness is a result of its derivation. If we ignore that, then you could say, oh yeah, it's true. But the truthfulness of any stated fact has to do with its relatedness and derivation to that which is unconditionally non-dependent. And since the atheist and the theist are both operating from a different absolute, or what's unconditionally non-dependent, both of their statements, when they say the sky is blue, they contradict each other in virtue of the implicit premises that are unstated.
Oh, well, no, that's where I lose it there, is that you're saying, so the specific statement, the sky is blue, right? And we assume that we're discussing this in the context of a reality where that statement is either true or false, right? I don't want to get into the whole thing about, it's not really blue, it's a scattering of light or whatever.
All right.
You know what I mean? It's some proposition that can be held.
Here's what'll be helpful for you. Let me just give you a little help here, okay? Whenever we make an assertion or a proposition, we'll either be making a statement of that which is dependent, or in rare instances, we're invoking that which is unconditionally non-dependent. So when we say the sky is blue, the sky is blue is not unconditionally non-dependent. So its truthfulness is in virtue of its derivation, its ultimate starting point, the absolute.
I wonder if we're using a bit of because why is it not just simple, like it's the truthfulness of the statement as a proposition is linked entirely to
truth. The truthfulness of a predication or a proposition will be in virtue of its derivation from that which is absolute. Period. There's no escaping it.
What's wrong with?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what's wrong with this? We're saying the truth of that statement is derived entirely from whether the statement comports with reality, period. What's wrong with that view?
Well, the question is, what do you mean by reality? Do you mean that which is the universal concrete, or that which is fundamentally absolute and unconditionally non-dependent and provides for all dependency states? Is that what you mean?
No, neither. I mean that. No, neither of those. I mean that which is the case.
Then the point is, then if you say reality, you mean the sum total of all entities?
What do you mean? I don't know what you mean by sum total of all entities. Well, I mean that which is the case.
No, when you invoke a state or a state of affairs, it's either going to possess the quality of being absolute or non-absolute, meaning it's dependent. There's no escaping this. So the point is, if a proposition is true, but the proposition itself is dependent or derivative, in other words, it's not unconditionally non-dependent itself, then its truthfulness or falsity will rest in its derivation from the origin point, that which is unconditionally non-dependent and absolute. So when an atheist says the sky is blue and the believer says the sky is blue, there are implicit premises about its derivation that are in contradiction to each other. So if we ignore the unstated premises behind it, then we could say that the statements are in agreement. But in actuality, metaphysically, they're not in agreement because they both emanate from a different origin point. And those origin points are in contradiction to each other.
Well, sure, they disagree on the derivation. Again, we're assuming we're discussing a world in which, so there's a reality.
Listen. You cannot discuss even a singular fact without its relation and its derivation to the absolute. There cannot be a fact that is independent of what is absolute and unconditionally non-dependent. No such fact can exist. So the truthfulness of any fact will be in relation to its derivation of that which is absolute. So when the atheist says the sky is blue and the Christian says the sky is blue, there's a superficial agreement. Say, well, we could both say it's true. Well, if we're willing to ignore that truthfulness is in virtue of its derivation, if we set that aside, then we can go, oh yeah. But if we're going to take into consideration that truthfulness is in virtue of its ultimate derivation, then those two statements are not both true. In fact, they're contradictory.
Yeah, well, that's a different statement, right? If somebody's saying the sky is blue because God, and another person saying the sky is blue because unicorn, or the sky is blue because...
It's really simple, or not God.
Yeah, or the sky is blue because universe created itself, and they insert anything.
Well, that's an incoherent notion.
It is. Sure, that's fine. Intentionally picking, I mean, that's why I said the sky's blue because unicorn, right? I mean, people could pick anything. Or the sky is blue because I don't know why, right?
If you say the sky is blue because if I don't know why, then the statement the sky is blue is meaningless.
Well, no. That's what I'm saying, is that the statement the sky is blue is still saying the sky is blue. And they would agree on that. And in our example, they would also be correct. No, I'm understanding it just fine.
What I'm pointing out is that if you say the sky is blue, ultimately in virtue of I don't know, then that renders the blue as unintelligible.
No. That's the point. It's not a simple matter of misunderstanding you. I literally don't understand what you're saying.
I'm not talking about semantic apprehension. I'm talking about metaphysical intelligibility. There's a difference. Yeah. Okay? Metaphysical intelligibility means that the proposition, assertion, or predication means something only in virtue of its ultimate and absolute derivation. Because remember, when you make a statement, you'll either be invoking that which is unconditionally non-dependent, or something that is dependent or has its derivation in the absolute. And everybody has in their mind, consciously, unconsciously, explicitly or implicitly, that something is fundamentally absolute. Because if you don't, then your predications don't mean anything. They have no intelligibility.
No, there are certainly people who are capable of forming beliefs about reality who aren't contemplative or don't can't articulate absolutes, right?
Even children, even children hold to a rudimentary concept that something's absolute.
Do you think they get it right though? Do you think that they hold a belief in the correct absolutes?
Well, they would have to. Otherwise, why would they be making daily decisions that involved that there would be continuity? What provides for continuity? What provides for uniformity? Okay. So at a very early age, children develop a very crude and rudimentary sense that something is absolute. They're not going to think of it in those terms, but you could sit a child down and say, is there something that keeps things the same and allows for other things to change? The kid's going to go, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
otherwise, why would they want to eat candy again? If there's not continuity, what's going to keep sweetness like it was yesterday or last week? So the point is, if we're in a conversation and we're willing to set aside metaphysics and we're ignoring in the conversation that something is true only in virtue of its derivation, then you can just loosely say, oh yeah, the atheist and the believer are saying the same thing. But in a more strict analysis, they're not. Their statements are in antithesis.
Yeah, but you're conjoining it with this other proposition, right? If I say the sky is blue and you say the sky is blue, that's an identical proposition, and they would hold an identical truth value.
Okay, do you know what an enthymeme is?
If I say there are no gods and the sky is blue, and you say there is precisely one God and the sky is blue, well, those are two different statements, and it's entirely possible. In fact, given the nature of that assertion, they could not have the same truth value.
Unless we,
that's what you're doing. You're conjoining it. You're conjoining it with other propositions.
Unless
I'm understanding it just fine.
Unless we are stating that which is fundamentally absolute and unconditionally non-dependent, then whatever other predication we are making, those predications or propositions will have implicit premises, including what's absolute. And if you ignore the unstated premises, then you can say superficially the two statements are the same. But when you take into consideration that the truth of even a singular fact is only in virtue of its derivation, then the two statements are contradictions.
Yeah. And you said that a few times now. What I'm saying is you're using the word ignore, and I'm using the word conjoin. So I'm saying if you you're right. You want to say it that way, that's fine. If you ignore, that is, if we're not discussing the underlying metaphysic, then they're superficially the same. I agree. But when you make a statement like the sky is blue, when you say a statement like the sky is blue, that statement is said without regard, or to use your word for it, ignoring other propositions that might be said about underlying metaphysics. So we're actually agreeing on that point.
So looking at it superficially, there can be points of agreement. But when you set the superficial approach to it aside, it's over. Then the statements are contradictory.
You go critical.
Well, again, not the statements we're discussing, not the actual, the simple belief, the sky is blue or this stick's longer than that stick. Those things. I mean, you're kind of characterizing them as if, well, one is superficial and doesn't really matter. Well, if that's the thing you're talking about, well, then that's the thing that matters.
Look,
if you're talking about the other thing.
Look, when the AAA guy comes to change my flat tire and he's wearing an atheist T-shirt and he says, "Wow, what a beautiful blue sky," I'm not going to argue with him about the fact that his statement is actually metaphysically unintelligible. I'm going to ignore his inconsistency because
it's not unintelligible. No, you wouldn't say that his statement is unintelligible. It's not unintelligible in your worldview or in his worldview.
It is metaphysically unintelligible. It is semantically apprehendable. I can grasp the semantics of it, but from his worldview, it's unintelligible. And the reason why he's not aware of it is because atheists and other skeptics are not careful thinkers about what the nature of intelligibility and truth is.